a world where we have everything and it's still not enough, we're often left wondering, is this really it?
Deep inside, you know there's more to life. You're ready to leave behind the old push your way through and claim the deeper, more meaningful life that's calling you.
That's what we invite you to explore with us.
We're your hosts,
Stephanie Allen
and Maren Stephanie. And this is the Soulful Leader Podcast.
Yay! Hi, welcome to the Soulful Leader Podcast. This is Stephanie and I'm here with Maren, and I've just been reflecting. We both have been reflecting a lot about that metaphor of the butterfly and the caterpillar. And I just recently was talking with somebody and they're like, why do we always have to move to the butterfly? Like, why can't we just be as a caterpillar? A caterpillar is comfortable, it's beautiful, it's fluffy, it's lovely. And, it's a good question. And I think sometimes we are forced to kind of grow. Like, nothing makes me crazier than when I just buy something new and then a year later, a new upgraded version comes out and I go, I have to upgrade. I have to upgrade. And of course, I have a lot of family and friends who refuse to upgrade. So they have these old operating systems that no longer communicate to the new ones. And it causes a lot of stress, but they're kind of caught in that mode of, well, this works. Why do I have to change? Why do I have to grow? And Maren, you were reminding me of a great movie that I truly love with John Travolta and Phenomena. And there was a line in that, and can you share with all of us that are out there listening that are struggling with, like, why can't we just be a caterpillar? Why do we have to grow all the time? Why do we have to move and change and up level and upgrade? And so why can't we just stay a caterpillar?
So it's interesting, in the movie you were mentioning, Phenomenon with John Travolta, and in case you haven't seen it, I'm not going to give too much away. And there's a scene where he's eating an apple and there are two children and they're upset. And he's eating this apple and he was sharing with them that everything is on its way to somewhere, because he's eating this apple, will digest it, and it will become a part of him. And we oftentimes don't think about food like that. We think about it goes through us, not that it's becoming a part of us. And everything that we take in literally becomes a part of us. It's on its way to somewhere. And in nature, stasis is death. So, there is no such thing as stasis in nature. It's either evolving or devolving. Like, if you think of a tree, it's growing until it dies, and then it starts to decay. And now it's feeding other things that are growing because it's decaying. And everything is symbiotic. And yet, as a culture, we have this notion that we work our whole lives and then we retire and we've achieved and we're done.
Unfortunately, that's when people start de-evolving.
Exactly. And that's the challenge. And I watched someone very dear to me go through that. She retired, and within 3 years, she had passed away. She was perfectly fine. I mean, she had some health problems, right? And then her brain was like sharp as a tack. She retired. She got, Alzheimer's, and then fell and then she passed away. And it was devastating for me, because it felt like that, of like, we're growing. And then when we stop, we don't think about it because everything's going somewhere. We're going somewhere. It's happening to us now. We're devolving. We're deteriorating.
And I think the frustration is that, I think really there's that part. It's like, well, I've worked really hard. I want to be able to rest. Can I just enjoy my life? Can I just be? And so we're kind of rebelling against, enough already. I've achieved everything I can possibly achieve. Can I just be happy with what is? And I feel like that's what this person was saying to me earlier, was they just wanted to be the caterpillar. Can we just stop pushing me? Can I just rest? And so there's finding that harmonization, isn't it? It's like, there's nothing wrong with being a caterpillar. There's nothing that, and I think that's where we kind of go is like, well, why am I being made wrong for wanting to be a caterpillar or not pushing or striving or going? But what we're suggesting is that there's actually another way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's very much another way. So is this either or? And even when I was saying it, it's like we're either growing or we're decaying, right? And even within that, it's true and it's also not true in that when a tree is growing, it might have a limb that dies, right? So it's not an either or. I have a beautiful old, it's got to be several hundred years old oak tree in my backyard, and it is it is dying, and it's got a good, half dozen branches that are still working on. So how do we get out? I think the thing for me is how do we get out of the either or
Yeah.
mindset
Yeah.
of when I'm working, it looks like this. I push, I strive, I hurt, and then when I retire, I look like this and I do nothing. What if?
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like that's kind of like thinking that we're balancing that out, but it's not really. We're still that either or this or that instead of the both and the unification of what if we could keep evolving at a pace that is, like I said, there's that Rumi quote that says, don't worry that your life's turning upside down. What if the life that is coming to you is better than the one that you have? Like, how do we know? We don't know, right? Like, it
Right.
could be, I'm not quite sure if that was quite the quote, but it's kind of that similar thing is that we hold on to what was, like, we hold on to the iPhone 6, even though there's an iPhone 15, but it's like we hold on to that iPhone because we're used to it and you know what? It does the job until it doesn't. Until you try to connect with other people who have already evolved and moved to the next level. And you're like, shoot, my Facebook Messenger isn't working with each other. And now there's all these other, and it's frustrating. I so get it. It's frustrating.
It
So like
is.
that new operating system is like, what if there's a both and? What if there's another way that we can, I don't know. I'm just so curious like at that. I was like, to make it beautiful and not to feel guilty that you're not present or you're not respecting from where you're already at. It's like there's that. Do you know what I mean? Like there's that. I should be grateful. I should be grateful for where I am, and I am grateful. So why am I made to feel guilty that I don't have the new doozy watts? The iPhone 2000. Who knows what it is, right? It's like, I'm not driving that car, or I don't live in that kind of a house or neighborhood, or I no longer am making money. I'm doing something else, and I think there's a
Well, and
there's a huge push.
there is a push. I think that particular thing is an inside job of not, you as you start to get to know yourself better and better, you start to align with you have to know what you believe and want before you
Mhm.
can even align with others. And we're not given the tools to do that in our society. Our society tells us, not even tells us, bombards
Yeah.
us with what we should want
Yeah.
and what's going to make us happy and what's going to make us fulfilled. And advertising is, I mean, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. And, they've done all the research into the psychology of things and how to manipulate us. And
Mm.
so, like, there's no shame in that we don't know what we want. How could you?
Yeah, there's no space. There's no
There's no
time. There's no
space.
energy.
No, we're constantly told. So it takes
Yeah.
effort and it is an inside job. And in order to get to the point where you're like, okay, I know what I want, then at that point, you can say, I do want to be a butterfly, or I don't. I do want to be a caterpillar. And I want to be that caterpillar, the one with the cool stripes, or I just want to be the brown one that sits in the corner, whatever it is, right? Like that's the place that you can come from and say, yeah, I really want that.
Hmm.
And guess what? That's moving towards something. Everything's going somewhere.
Hmm.
That's making a clear choice for yourself. When we just back off and say, I don't want to. Don't make me. Now we're
Yeah,
not
yeah,
actually in choice. We don't have the space.
yeah. And I think of, like, when we don't have the space, it kind of reminds me of being in the chrysalis. Like,
Hmm.
you're in that little cocoon, you don't have the space. So what do you do when you're in that cocoon? To me, this is the opportunity to really look at, and you're saying, what do I want? And I think a lot of times we don't know what we want. We're
We
kind of
don't.
told what we should want. And that's the same as values too. We're kind of told what we should value instead of really taking the time and the inquiry, like the inner looking within, to actually say, yeah, what do I value? What is important to me? And why? I think the key question is asking, why is that a value? Or was that just a value that was kind of pushed on to me?
Hmm.
Why did I choose it? Like, is it something that is really truly mine? And I think this is a real key. I had somebody who came to me recently too who said, "Oh my God, Stephanie, I only, like somebody told me I should look at my values." And she goes, "I have to admit, I had to go home and like Google it and go, I don't even know what a value is." And I'm like,
Hmm.
I think that's so honest. That took a tremendous amount of courage to even admit that. And I'm like, you know what? I think that's so wise of you to even question, like, what is a value, and how do I know what it is, and what is it for me, and why is that my value? And I think these are great questions as a soulful leader to ask
S-
ourselves and each other. What do we value and why?
Yeah. And I just want to point out something is that we're still talking about doing some sort of work, which can feel overwhelming when you're in that space of like, ugh, I just want to stop.
Yeah.
And one of the things I noticed when you were talking earlier is we're actually talking about the yin and the yang, the outer
Hmm.
and the inner. And I'm going to draw some parallels. So, work your whole life to get someplace and then retire, take a rest, finally rest. Guess what? That's your outer, work, 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 and your inner, rest, 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 right?
Hmm.
There's a reason that day and night happen on a on a regular basis. And
That's
we
right.
on this podcast we've talked about the inhale and the exhale. We don't just do one. Both of them have to happen. And that's the inhale and the exhale. And
Hmm.
that's the inner and the outer. And the same thing with what you were talking about of like you had a very highly successful person come back and say, "What the heck is a value?" Because
Hmm.
that's an inner thing. And so what I think the an option for us to start to, like a rabbit hole we can start to go down as a culture is what would it look like? Not even start to have to go down. What would it look like to actually have both the inner and the outer when we're doing everything? So that we have rest while we're
Hmm.
working. So that we don't have to wait until we're retired to get that. And we're not so exhausted by life by the
Yeah.
time we're done working that all we can do is say, I can't.
Well, that isn't even having a life, right?
No, it's
That
not.
that's no life at all. Like, you're barely existing. It's like treading water with, you're just barely having your nose out of the water. It's like you are barely sucking in enough life to exist. And you're working really hard to try to keep your head up. I mean, one of my favorite songs is "In Your Eyes" by Peter Gabriel, and there's a line in it that says, "Working so hard for my survival."
Hmm.
I'm like, well, isn't that the consciousness of what we've been projecting? Well, how do you get off that treadmill? How do you, like, because we're told more is better, do more, have more, and then all of a sudden we stop, and everything that has been accumulating in the momentum behind us is now hits us from behind and whacks us out. And now we're, given such a short time in our lifespan to actually live now, that we either don't have the health or
Right.
the life force, and I don't just mean money, I mean mental and emotional life force, to actually choose to do something that really nourishes our soul,
To enjoy, like
to
literally
be in joy
to
and
be
enjoy
in
it.
joy.
Hmm.
Right. Yeah. And I think I love this because that concept of everything's going somewhere, it really, for me, it made me stop and go, well, if everything's going somewhere, including me, I want to be more conscious and conscientious about where I'm going, so that I'm not handing my life force over to something, a job that I get up and I begrudge every day,
Mhm.
or a relationship that's, unhealthy, or even just like unconsciously doing the whole refrigerator run where you stand and you just look in front of the refrigerator like, huh, what can I eat now? I know I'm completely unconscious in that moment.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I really do want to bring more consciousness to it because I'm going someplace anyway. I'm either going to go have a piece of chocolate and enjoy it and say, I did that consciously, or I'm going to have the piece of chocolate and not really even taste it and then need to go back and have more. Right? So I'm hoping that as a society, the more we become aware of the fact that we are going someplace and we're going there rapidly as a society. And what will it take for us on an individual level to show up more consciously in our own moments?
Yeah. Because if we aren't conscious too, we just consume, like you said, the chocolate cake. We're just consuming and trying to get whatever, whatever we're empty of. What we're trying to get it from outside of ourselves. You
Mm,
know, we're trying to get it more love from our partner. We're trying to get more appreciation at work. We're trying to get more money in our bank account. We're trying to get whatever it is. Like we're reaching outside, outside, outside instead of going internally. It's like, how do I even give that to myself internally? What does even that mean? Like when someone's, can you give that to yourself? I'm like, what are you talking about? Give myself respect. I give myself respect all the time. What are you talking about? But then if we can create the space inside, and what does that mean? Create space
yeah.
inside, to give ourselves time. Like I have a really good friend of mine who I just adore. And she's highly successful in the outer world, but she will constantly complain that there's never enough time. I never have
Mm,
enough time. I'm always late. I'm always running. I never have enough time. And I was jokingly saying, it was like, well, what are your priorities? I have too many priorities. Well, what do you value? I value everything. And I'm like, just taking the time to really look at what is it that I value and why, and then choosing. It's like then choosing to align with that to meaning. Stephen Covey used to talk about the big rocks,
mm,
and there's a great, it's an old YouTube video that I think you can Google and find it. And he talks about two buckets, and one bucket is empty, and he takes the bucket and he just puts all the rocks in, but they don't all fit. And he said, now here's what we have to do. It's like we have to change our paradigm. Instead of just throwing everything in the bucket, trying to make it fit and force it. And he said, you have to take the big rocks first. And that's what you value. Those are the things that are most important to you, that you want to put your time and your energy into it. And you have to put those in first. And then all the smaller rocks literally fit in. It's wild. But if you put all the little rocks and all the other little stuff in first, then none of the big rocks will fit. And you'll never have enough time. You'll never have enough energy. And it does take a paradigm shift. But that's even backing up again, like I said, to make space, to actually go inside and go, okay, what is it? What is it that I truly want? Or what is it that I value? What is most important to me? And then having to let go of those old behavioral patterns and the old narrative that goes on in your head, because that's what's taking up space, by the way. Those old habits, but if you can put that aside for a moment, and then it shifts.
So when you say the old narrative in your head,
Hmm.
do you have an
There's not enough
example?
time. There's not enough time. I'm getting older. That's why my knees hurt, and it's just going to get worse. Those are old narratives, old paradigms, old ways. And so I would say, first of all, how does that thought make you feel? Like, what kind of energy does it take from you when you think that thought? Because that's going to take up space. That's going to take energy from you generally. And then to really look at it, it's like, when you think that thought, when there's not enough time, or my knees hurt because I'm getting old and it's only going to get worse. How does that make me behave?
Mm.
Maybe in the short term, it might motivate me to make some slight changes, but generally, for me anyway, personally, it makes me reactive. And then I do reactive behaviors. Oh, I better go to the gym. No, I'm not just going to go to the gym and do, a half an hour workout. I'm going to go to the gym and do a 2.5 hour workout. I'm going to like restrict my diet. And I'm like I'll go whole hog in. And then all of a sudden my knees hurt even more. I'm like, well, this was counterproductive now, wasn't it? Instead of saying, well, is that true? How does that make me feel? It makes me feel old. And if it makes me feel old, I'm either going to overstrive or under deliver. I'm going to do the opposite. I'm just going to sit and wallow in self pity because my life is over and I'm getting old and I've already got myself buried. My funeral's already happened. And I mean, that's depressing. Or I go, wait a minute. Is that really true? It doesn't have to be. What if I could be present to what I love? I'm like, I had this conversation with my knees the other day. I'm like, because I was pushing, I was doing that. So I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to get old. You think this is going to get better? I'm like, wait a minute. I had to almost stop and go, what is it that I value? I value movement. I love to move. And inwardly, outwardly, dance, all that. I love to move. And I'm like, right, I love this. Well, do I have to move like, the Energizer Bunny? Well, probably not. I can move slowly. I can move mindfully. I can move, you know, quickly. I can move so many different ways. But really, the value is that I love to move. So when I embody that, I love to move, it all of a sudden gives me freedom. I'm not limited. And my behavior changes. I'm not in reaction. I'm actually in responsiveness. So I become responsible. And when I make choices that are more reactive, I can go, wait, stop. I'd love to move. Is this going to help me come closer to that value of health and well-being? Or is it going to take me further away? And without shame, but just now I'm giving myself freedom and choice. And it changes everything.
And the whole like attracts like. So when you come from a place of I'm getting old, you will attract other people who think like that. You'll attract experiences in your life to prove that to you. You'll attract all of the stuff in alignment with I'm getting old. When you say, I love to move, you'll attract people who also love to move, movement in your surroundings, and all of the experiences to bolster that, to then also go, oh, that's what she wants to do. So now there's movement everywhere. And guess what? That person's not getting old because they're not aligning with it. So it's just such a, we do think of life as this outer thing, and it's a both and. There's the outer and the inner work that we keep talking about. So the other day, I just gave a client of mine an assignment to take an entire day. And I've done this with people, take an entire day, take an entire week, whatever you have space for. Take an hour of your day, whatever. And literally write down all the thoughts that come into your brain. And you won't get all of them. And one of the things you'll notice is what are the most repetitive ones. Like Stephanie said, oh, my knees hurt because I'm old. What do you tell yourself? What are you telling others? And write them down. And then look at, is that who I want to be? Are those aligned with my values? And maybe then you need to take out a different piece of paper and say, what are my values? Right?
Yeah.
It's a really powerful exercise. And we don't realize how much the same exact thing. We say it to ourselves and to others over and over, and it defines our life. I actually do this exercise for myself on a fairly regular basis. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. I mean, I can hear my own thoughts going, oh my God, I think I could get right a cramp if I sat down and again, that's another thought, isn't it? It's like, is that true? I don't know if that's true. It's like, it's a good practice to empty one's mind. And I know some of you are saying out there, like, I can't empty my mind. It just, and like, you aren't your mind, by the way. Our minds, we're swimming. We're all swimming in the mind.
So
So
I do want to point out that this is, you could use it as a mind emptying activity, as like a
Mhm.
meditation. The purpose of that I was speaking to is actually having it be, I want to notice, what are my repetitive themes? What do I always tell myself? Because
Yeah.
those are the things that are actually running your life. And you don't realize it. They're running it under the radar. We can't run everything. It's like, you don't tell your heart to beat, it beats. You don't tell yourself, like, okay, I need to take a breath right now. I need to take a breath right. Like there are things that go on autopilot. Most of our life is on autopilot. And all of those subconscious things that we tell ourselves on a daily basis. So the goal of this is to actually recognize or acknowledge or start to notice, what are the themes what are the things that I tell myself that I don't even realize that I tell myself,
Mhm.
and start to make it conscious. Everything's going somewhere. You're going in the direction of those things. Are they where you really want to be going?
Oh,
Put
yeah.
yourself in choice, right?
Yeah, and this can work in the other way too. Like I look at chronic pain, and it could be in the body, but it could also be something that's not working in your life. I often will say, okay, what thought is creating that situation?
Mm.
So going back to my knees, right? I'm like, what the heck? I could be angry at my knees, but that's not going to that's not going to make them feel any better. Instead of like coming into relationship with it. And I think that's what we're seeing with our thoughts, is come into relationship with them and see what are the commonality, like what are the same kind of thoughts over and over and over again. And those will actually create a behavior, and they'll create a reality. And you can work it backwards too. You can go from the reality, hey, this is my reality right now, and I don't like it. Whatever that might be. It's like illness, relationship, money, whatever it is, whatever the reality is, and then work it back and say, okay, well, what behavior is that creating, or has, you know, and what am I thinking from that, and change it,
Yeah.
and just automatically just like, hey, make this like kind of a fun little game and say, well, what if I changed my thought and then I matched a behavior to that thought to create a different reality, just to see what happens. Why not?
Yeah. Yeah, there's many roads to this particular roam, and it's kind of a fun thing. And it does, you know what, to take it back to the beginning, it's one of the ways that we can get out of the either or. That
Mm,
it's this or it's that. It's like, what's actually going on right now, and where do I want to go? And now, right, wrong, good, bad, whatever. This is what's happening, and that's where I want to go. So let's focus on those things and do our best to get go of the inner critic that wants to judge us for all the bad things that we've done to get ourselves here, right? So let go of all of that as much as possible, and just focus on, okay, no, this is where I want to go.
mhm, mhm.
Yeah,
And retirement, for those of you who are listening to that, I mean, that what a great opportunity to then
yeah,
go inward and say, what are my values? And, it's amazing how you change the internal, and the external will change.
and continuing doesn't have to look like work. That's an old paradigm.
Mhm.
That's one of those, how could I continue and not have it feel like I'm working so hard? And at the same time, I'm still evolving. Maybe it could be
And totally
play.
supported in my life.
Yeah. I mean, look at kids. Kids evolve and they play. The way that kids evolve is that they play. We lose that as adults. Maybe retirement is about getting that back. That would be fun.
Yeah. Recreation, recreation.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Well, I hope everybody has fun this week playing with either making a list of the things that are going on in your head or looking at what's going on out there and kind of diving backwards into finding out what's the thought that's creating it, or just maybe even looking at how do I play at my work. So we're so grateful that you guys are joining us every week, and we look forward to seeing you next week on the Soulful Leader podcast. If you'd like to, you can always join us on our Facebook page or our LinkedIn page at The Soulful Leaders. Thanks so much.
And that wraps up another episode of the Soulful Leader podcast with your hosts, Stephanie Allen
and Maren Stephanie. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to dive deeper, head over to our website at thesoulfulleaderpodcast.com.
Until next time.